Hi, Keith.
Hey Aaron, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. I don't know if I'm doing good, just, doing.
Just doing, just
Good is up for
I like
who
that. I'm doing.
I'm doing. Who defines good? And does it matter?
Are you enjoying the doing?
Mostly, yes. Yep, yep. And yourself?
Um, yeah, I'm doing. I'm doing.
So we at the last podcast we were going to talk about something. I can't remember what we were going to talk about this time. It was
I was keen to explore this notion of non-attachment, and thinking about it, I thought, wait a second, you need something to not be attached to first. So, I'm fascinated that um, the way you've been talking to me about this, that you have a goal. It's you make it very compelling. That in itself is going to be interesting to explore. And then you take any attachment away from that. I'm thinking, how do these two exist in the same universe? You want something really badly, you want it to be compelling, and then you want to take away any sort of uh, I have to have this or my life's over sort of attitude.
yeah. I mean, the caveat I have to put in is that I've been meditating for 34 years. And I do suggest that that's had quite a significant influence on attachment in general, meaning that most attachment, actually, if you just write down submodality shift for a moment, I'll write down submodality shift.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Is that when, a good meditation practice will generally take us inward and will take us into a place of, it's a million adjectives, of calm, of transcendence, of feeling removed from, of all manner of different kinds of experience, where we're not dictated to by the exterior world. We're not dictated to by what's going on around us. And I think, and in that comes a sense of well-being, peace, and the science of it, which has come out of, they've done a lot of research into this at the University of in Iowa around transcendental experience and how it kind of shines a light in a dark room. It kind of connects us with something that's kind of like deeply profound, and yet this profound thing experience doesn't have a narrative. It's not saying, hey, here I am on this profound, amazing thing, and I'm here to be your friend forever. Let's have a little chat. It doesn't do any of that. It doesn't, it's just there. And that's where the words omniscient, omnipresent, all that sort of carry on come from. And I guess, you know, diving into that pretty much every single day, which I have, has kind of triggered that neurological aspect. So I guess what I'm saying is that, and there are ways of doing that. People do this knitting, even. You can be sitting there knitting, and it's just so programmed. You're knitting a sweater, and it's just row after row, and you just suddenly there's no thought. And it was actually quite an interesting experience of when when I learned to meditate. The teacher told me a story where one of his elderly students came in one day and said, can I talk to you about my experience? I've had this weird situation. and my teacher says, well, tell me about it. And basically the guy just started going through a list of all the experiences of having become kind of what you'd call enlightened. And the teacher, he said, well, what are we doing? And he said, I was knitting. No, and seriously, it was because there's that kind of sense of like, well, I don't have to think, but my body is entertained, if you like. So it's kind of like that, what they call busy resting, or I can't remember the actual terminology they use in psychology for it, but active resting. And so what happened was that this person, and my teacher had a couple of experiences of this with clients where, sorry, with people he had taught, is that they had just transcended and stayed there. And usually more elderly people who'd had a life and possibly had less to be attached to the outside world. I think the challenge we have is that we are living in a world that is just built on attachment. We're entrained to attach to sensory input, and so the aspect of submodality shift is that there's a submodality shift in a sense where, I mean, just this morning I was meditating and I had no, the sense of my hands and arms disappeared. There was a sense that they just disappeared because my body started to become less part of the conversation of quietness, and that that happens quite often, and yet that's a modality. It's a kinesthetic physical modality. And my query is, the first thing we do is to become less attached to something is where we close our eyes. In hypnosis, I can't remember if it's called the Elman technique. It might be the other one, but anyway, there's the eye lock process, which is where we close our eyes and then we pretend that we can't open our eyes. And what that does is it suspends disbelief and removes the critical left brain from the conversation. And so we find we kind of just dive a bit deeper, a bit easier, become more relaxed quite quickly. It's really lovely, quick, almost like a rapid induction, if you like, into relaxation. And then it's much easier to go on a journey with that. And then, once doing that, one could come back to one's breath. And the beauty of coming back to the breath, for example, is it's just the most automatic thing we do that we're conscious of generally. When we're conscious of it, we're conscious of the most automatic thing we do. And so bringing the awareness back to that takes us, and then at some point we'll get bored with that and we'll disappear. We'll either go inward or we get distracted by, did we put the washing out or some stuff like that. And so part of that question is, part of the answer is that having some kind of meditative or contemplative inward stroke really helps because if I'm not attached, nature hates a vacuum. So it's like, well, if I'm not attached to this thing or that, well, what am I doing? Where is my direction of attention? Where is my direction of whatever? Yeah. And I guess the other part of it is there's just the conscious awareness that, a lot of this, my feelings about anything out there in the world or anything that I'm thinking about, real or imaginary, is kind of a construct that I'm generating. Like I can see outside the window and I can see someone kite surfing out on the ocean there. And yet the way I'm seeing that is probably very different to how you might see it. You might not even see the kite surf. You might be focused on the trees or the waves or whatever it is. It's like, so it's a kind of and then I'll have my internal response to that. And so what is, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering that question. I'm not sure I should be answering any questions, actually.
Really?
Now, what's this about again?
It's a curious direction to go in. There's this um, for want of a better way to put it. There's this whole world that we can access where we detach from the external.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's a curiosity in itself. If I'm attached to something in the external world, this meditative process, um, my as you put it, my attention is somewhere else. So
yes.
that external isn't part of the story that I'm experiencing in the moment. So
Yeah, and so carry on with that. Carry on with that.
so I want to go back to having a goal in the first place. So
Yeah, yeah. So that's what came up for me just then. Yeah. So so to answer that question a little bit was that the goal is I don't like the word goal because it kind of suggests this absolute. It's an absolute. It's like an absolute in time, space,
yeah,
and
how
reality.
about what's the experience I want?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. So what's the experience I want? There's a little bit more plasticity in that, in the
Absolutely,
structure
yeah,
of that.
I agree.
And and it allows for nature to be a part. Because if I'm creating a goal, it'd be well, like, end of June, I want to be a multi-millionaire, and then I'll work backwards from there. But it's got to be the end of June, and it's like, well, so I'm going to write my list, I'm going to write my goal out, and I'm going to read it to myself every single day because that's what they did at Harvard and all that sort of stuff. And so they're the guys who always get their goals because they write it down and read it to themselves and imagine it every single day. They did a Harvard study. It's quite fascinating. The guys who wrote it all down and read it every single day were the ones who actually generally got what they wanted. But see, the beauty of writing something down and reading it out is that you put that paper down and you get on with your day. They probably didn't think about it much during the day because they're too busy. So they've kind of detached, they're removed. They're just because they've done the job. The job is, well, this is how you manifest. You manifest by first, well, what do I want? And secondly, when would I like that by? And then you visualize it and you imagine yourself having that thing, you know. And I got a great story. I mean, a client from years ago. I'm sure he won't mind me. He probably never listens to the podcast anyway, but he won't mind, and no one will know who he is. But he's just a fantastic, fascinating guy, and he basically managed to get an extremely expensive car. And this, the story that he told me was that he would go to the car dealership every night and on the way home from work, and he would just put his nose up against the glass and just imagine. He pictured himself, and then took photos of this thing. Got GQ magazines, cut a little head off his own of photos of himself. And, but yeah, you laugh, man. But like literally within a year, he was driving that car. And it got down to the point where he was literally had his nose up against the glass and got tapped on the shoulder, and he just about shat himself because he said, "What the?" And it was the owner of this car company, and they said, "Come inside. We need to do a deal." And literally, like, I can't remember how many months it was later, but it was very quick. But he was doing the same thing. So he was every night he was doing his fantasy, and every day, he had his photo in the on the car, and he was driving a shitty car, but they had the photo on the dash, and the photo on the fridge, and the photo on this. And I can tell the story with Dad getting a sailboat exactly the same way. A photo on the fridge, photo on the, and next minute he owns a sailboat, and I guess it's, but the interesting thing about that, there's a point where you just let go because you've done the job. The job is, I've built the foundation, I've done my imagining. Okay, now I'm working. And that's your release. You just release it. It's kind of like prayer. People pray, they do incantations, they do affirmations, but you're not spending the entire day, incanting and praying. Some people maybe do. But there's a point where where there's this place where you do it and then you walk away and you do your job, you do whatever it is. And then, and I wonder if walking away, it's like, you plant the seed and you walk away. You don't just keep scratching away at the soil to check that the seed's, doing what it's supposed to do.
Hmm.
Whereas you disrupt it.
Well, that's a curiosity for me. Is it so they naturally did some process spontaneously, unconsciously, whatever, where they're obsessed, but there's a point in time where they have to get on with the day.
Yeah, I remember Maharishi saying once, this is a TM guy, Transcendental Meditation guy, he says, meditating for 20 minutes in the morning is your work, and then you just go and play. And in a sense, doing a creative visualization with some affirmation and some visualization, that's your work, because you're kind of presenting to the thing that's greater than you could ever imagine. This thing, this morphic intelligence that's surrounding us, and managing to, even though we're getting told every single day that we're all going to die and it's all going to come crashing down around our ears and the temperature's going to change, we're all going to flood. We're still here.
Mm.
And there's 8 billion people who generally are able to still communicate with each other, have relationships, make babies, and do all this kind of crazy stuff while inventing stuff. And I mean, that's a miracle, to be fair. So, but you ask most people how they're doing it, they've got no idea.
Mm.
You ask biologists how a lot of this stuff works, they've got no idea. Oh, there's these things called genes, and there's these things called, other stuff. And it's like, and they kind of just do stuff together, and we can take pictures and write theses about them, but in the end, they have no idea really, because it'll change next week because someone will find something that's even smaller, more microscopic.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
okay. Let me throw a spanner in the works. So you've given two examples of people who have consciously desired something,
hmm,
and whatever their internal process is, you're suggesting that there might be some form of non-attachment going on. And I'd like to contrast that to my experience, where I obsessed about having a lotus since my teenage years, and I don't
yeah.
have one. So something's going on with those people that actually
Do you have a
achieve.
model of a lotus?
Yeah,
Yeah, so you
I've got a
do have
few.
one.
No, well, that's a difference. There's a difference between a toy and the thing you can drive.
Does your
So
unconscious mind understand that difference? Does it
yeah,
know the difference?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So whatever's going on for them,
Hmm.
there's some sort of attitude of abundance, or I can have that for them is not a there's no there's no internal conflict about that. There's
No.
I work, I make money, I can put my money wherever I want. My life experience has been one of I've been motivated by scarcity.
Sorry, cat just
Oh,
jumped on my back.
that looked really painful.
No, it's all gone now. Sorry, listeners. We have a new kitten, and it just decided that it wanted to jump on my back. Now it's gone. It's all good. Carry on, Keith.
Where you
As you were,
jumped.
Keith.
So, yeah, my life experience is one that I've been motivated by scarcity most of my life, and it's only in the last, I think, decade that I recognize the pattern.
Mm.
So no matter what I put out there, I'd read the books. All you have to do is imagine it, and the universe will manifest for you. None of
Yeah,
that is
it
really
won't if you've got an underlying belief, and that's
exactly.
yeah. If
Mine,
you've got an
mine, mine
underlying
was
belief, yeah, of scarcity,
mine
and
was
I'm not. Yeah,
scarcity.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
allowed to have. There'll never be enough. Uh, if I get to that point, it'll be gone. You know.
mm, yeah, yeah,
So that's a curiosity for me. So
yeah.
to
So
say that all these people had to do was imagine and cut out their head and put on the photo. Um, for me, there must be a whole lot more going on with those people that's different to my model of the world.
yeah, and also the models that those two examples were primarily of people who weren't having the kind of conversations that you and I have been having for the last 15 or 16 years. So they're kind of very much about success is the all-important goal.
Hmm.
Um, and having this kind of representation of success is an all-important goal. Whereas the conversations you and I have not really been about that fundamentally. They've been about
Not at all.
not at all. Yeah, exactly. So there's potentially part of the answer. But also what we were talking about last time was, abundance and scarcity. And, scarcity is, the query that would come to mind is, well, how do you know that you have a belief in scarcity? And then how can we change the structure of that belief so it can be easily replaced by a new idea, which is a structure of abundance.
Mm.
And then the query, or the other query is, well, where in your life do you experience abundance? Where do you experience abundance in your life? Because it's, the one of the people in this example that I gave did not have abundance of any description in more than one other part of their life. So I mean, it's like, so sure, could make this thing happen, could bring all their focus to it, but in some other aspects of their life, there was definitely a lacking of abundance, and they were the first to own up to that, or to say that. And so I guess, it's all about balance, and it's all about where is the general focus. And then, of course, underlying that, or with that, is, well, what are the beliefs that are either fueling or limiting, the ability to. I mean, it's also kind of like if I've got a really bad illness and I keep saying to myself, I'm happy and healthy, then the challenge might be that I actually start creating a lot of conflict, because there's a part of me that's just actually not healthy at all. Having said that, many people who manage to get over chronic illness with a change of mindset have a general change of mindset. It's not just a specific with one affirmation, that they do. There's a lot that goes with. So this, the gentleman with the car, there were a lot of things that he also recognized he had to change to help manifest this thing. He worked 14, 16 hours a day. He was up before anyone, left after everyone. And that's why it was 10 o'clock at night when he was, tapped on the shoulder outside this car sales company. And so there are sacrifices in some regards and that sort of thing as well. And I guess that comes back to, well, what am I prepared to do as part of the work? And I think just what came to mind is also it's not like, well, I do this one thing and that's the thing that does it. What it will do is if I say, for example, if I suddenly start changing my focus, I have a sense of what I want, so I start affirming that, and I have visualizations, and I have a morning process for 10 minutes where I write my goals and say them out loud and have a visualization around that. Then that'll start to change the neurological structure of my brain. So I might, or my physiology, so I might notice that I'm becoming more wanting to get healthy, or might be more attracted to a certain kind of environment or a certain kind of people, that sort of thing. To look at it in isolation. Yeah, but the non-attachment thing, I think, is that what occurred to me was, with these kind of people who've successfully done this, is there is a sense of like they do that bit of work and then they let it go and get on with life.
Yeah.
So there's that element of, well, I know what I want, but now I'm just going to go and do what I need to do, whatever that is. But it's like they've let that go. There isn't an attachment to it. And my learning over the last couple of years with this is that well, my query is, okay, so let's say I get a Maserati. Let's say I own this Maserati. Well, how will that feel? What is the feeling I'm after? What is the experience I'm actually after when I imagine sitting in this Maserati, whatever the hell it is? And I guess that's the thing that we often miss, is like, well, what's the driving feeling? you know. Um,
Mm.
and once again, though, those feelings can be very gluey. You know, we can get really attached to wanting those feelings.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that's if we're on track with that or.
Well, if I can just put non-attachment to one side, because I think that's something that we do afterwards. Because you
Mm,
brought up something for me that's for me it's is uh, exciting. The multifaceted nature of abundance. So this guy wants a sports car, the sports car of his dreams. So this is a thing. Abundance comes in different flavors, though.
mm.
So he can have a thing. What's it like for him to relate to his partner if he has one? What's it like for him to relate
Well,
to
that's
his
potentially the thing where he was failing,
yeah? How's
where
he
he was
relating?
really struggling. Yeah.
Yeah, how's he relating to his children? How's he relating to if he goes outdoors and walks through the forest or the bush, or goes down to the ocean or climbs a mountain.
Yeah.
So how's he relating to experiences other than this physical thing? So I'm talking about the multifaceted nature of abundance. So
Mm.
if you're willing, can we explore that? How do we know he that's an example of someone focused on that particular thing. How can we explore or ask the question: are there patterns of scarcity running that might be related to other aspects of abundance?
Well, the answer's in the question, really, isn't it? You know.
Well, run it with me. If I think I'm running scarcity,
Yeah.
what are we going to do?
Well, Chris, how do you know? How do you know that you're running uh, a pattern of scarcity? How do you know that? So, what's the memory?
Well, the lotus is the easy one, so I don't have a lotus. The,
Hmm.
the memory is it's I've never been able to articulate it. I know I get a sense that I modeled it from my father.
Hmm.
He worked his ass off all of his life before he developed extreme dementia. Um, and yet, I mean, it's not like anyone said it to me. No one used the words, but I can remember from a very young age, I'm not allowed to have, or there will never be enough, or um, it's really hard to articulate. I can feel it, but putting words to it because of the words I'm using, the words I used just then,
What's the
don't.
feeling?
Um, Good question. What's the feeling?
And where is it? Where's the feeling?
Well, the first sense I get is it's in my chest.
Yep. And if the feeling expressed itself as a word,
I don't know if it's one word.
or
I don't know
phrase,
if I
or
can.
a couple of
I
words.
don't know if I can latch onto one word. Words fail me. It's something like you're not allowed to have. So it's not even I'm not allowed to have it. It's you're not allowed to have it.
So that's an instruction. What's the
Yeah.
feeling that follows that for you? So you're not allowed to have. It's in your chest. What's the emotional feeling response to that?
I'm being too conscious. I'm coming up with conscious answers. None of
So
them feel
in
like.
in in your chest, what color is it? When you reflect
Uh,
back on telling you can't have, what's the
yeah.
what's the immediate color that this
I don't see a color. I see effervescent bubbles.
effervescent. And how do they move in their effervescence?
Um,
Like if you were to use your hand and you
yeah,
moved your hand.
there's a sort of a circular radiating out, coming back in on itself.
So keep doing. So if you keep doing that,
Yeah.
and then you speed it up a bit, make it a bit bigger, what happens to the feeling?
Makes it worse.
And then slow it down. So yeah, keep going, and then slow it down slightly, and then change direction.
What, reverse it?
Yeah, reverse
Yeah.
it. Yeah. What happens when you reverse it?
It's a lot more calm.
A lot more calm. And when it's a lot more calm, what happens to you can't have?
Uh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
um,
Keep doing it with
I
your hands.
yeah, I felt bigger. I felt like I was more of an adult shape than a childlike shape,
Yeah.
and there was a sense of um, pushback.
Yeah. And if you were to push back and you were to do that in a way that defines the values that you have today, what would be the pushback? Would it be verbal? Would it be physical? Would it be some other way?
Um, what happened sort of instantaneously, and I was sort of questioning. I didn't know if it was me just doing it consciously. It was like, who are you to say?
Yeah. Good call. So in that moment, would it be correct to say that there's a sense of distinction that occurs, that you are somehow distinct now from this figure? Because the figure being
Mm,
your father, the challenge a lot, I guess, is and having worked, a lot in this context with clients, is that, when we're really young, there's a lack of distinction. So what goes for dad and what dad says, and his emotion when he says it, becomes my emotion, and attached to that emotion is the words.
mm,
And we don't know that he's just projecting his own sense of lack, for example. Like,
yeah,
we
yeah.
don't know that he's projecting his own sense of um, uh, what is it, abundance and
Scarcity.
scarcity. So he's feeling scarcity, perhaps, and he's projecting it onto you. And he's saying, well, if I can't have it, you can't have it. But he doesn't know he's saying that. He's just built a belief because he's running that belief.
Yeah.
Because, and the one thing about belief is, if I haven't experienced long enough, and we've learned this, recently, is like, if you tell someone even a lie enough, it'll become their truth and they will believe it's true. And so, so we
Mm,
can have this sense that if my father has experienced enough of scarcity, then he'll believe that that's his lot. And he'll believe that, well, my son will probably is the same as me because he's from my genetic pool. And so that's his lot. And so that's his belief, that's his projection. We don't know that that is the case. We just go, oh, well, shit, okay. That's
yeah.
it. There goes the Lotus. I'm stuck with a Matchbox toy.
Well, it's interesting because I'm one of five siblings,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'm the only one that took on that. So I
yeah.
don't think my dad ever. I don't have any recollection of him using those exact words, but there were certainly behaviours and words used that were implicit in the communication. Was it was really fearful. He always made himself out to be better than me,
Yeah.
and who knows what he was
Or,
trying to gain
or,
from that.
or can I just, if devil's advocate, was it your perception that he always made himself out to be better than you? And
I can only
because
go. I
there's
can
a
only go on the
sense,
behavior. Yeah, yeah. I can
yeah,
only go on
because
the behavior of the words. Yeah.
yeah, because
Part of
there's a sense of, sorry to interrupt, but there's a sense of, there's a sense of a lack, or of what's that? I have trouble with this word that's the opposite of abundance, which is kind of cool.
Scarcity.
Scarcity. I have a real problem with the word scarcity, which I'm feeling quite good about, actually. I just really struggle with that word scarcity. Actually, I'll write it down and underline. There we go. Got it. With a big arrow. That's the word there. Pay attention. because it doesn't, I don't relate to it very well. So, which is quite funny. But once again, the feeling I have about something that is said to me can in itself feel like if I don't know how to respond, then I have a scarcity. If I don't know, if I don't have the language to respond, I have a scarcity because the language isn't there, and so, kind of inherent in the father-son relationship can be that challenge. And everyone knows growing up in a family of multi-siblings that there's always, all the kids will generally have different relationships with the same parents, and those, and it's personality based. It can be all sorts of crazy things. It can even be you were the first, and oh my God, that just changed my life, and I don't think I can ever forgive you, or whatever it is. It's like, you ruined my life coming into the world so soon. I was only 12.
I was only 12.
My wife was 36, but I was only 12. Oh my, I mean, not my wife, but I mean, that's how it happened. I mean, it wasn't my fault. I'm so sorry. What? Sorry, that's so inappropriate. But anyway, it made you laugh.
It's a good point, though.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You even get twins who have different experiences of their relationship with their parents. They are brought up completely different. They have different memories. I've worked with twins. They've quite different memories. They're quite different relation, and they were minutes apart.
Yeah.
And so
Well, it's interesting because when I was going to say,
yeah,
my siblings have been far more successful than me. But that's, once again, when I look at the multifaceted nature of abundance, they've been very successful in very narrow bandwidths.
yeah, yeah.
And I've made abundance that small bandwidth everything that is abundant. But it's not, because I've watched them throughout their lives, and I think there are some places you're not really happy, or
Well, yeah.
you're not. Yeah. So I mean, I've known it, but the light bulb just went on. I thought, that's interesting. Because they're all very capable of extreme focus
Yeah.
and getting to where they wanted to go in that small bandwidth. And when you look outside of that, there are aspects of their lives I wouldn't choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so they had the same father, they had the same mother.
So my query is, what changes for you when you change you become adult size, you become pushback, you kind of gravitate more to that energy. What happens to the I can't have?
There was a lovely sense when I became bigger, more adult like, and you had me making that motion. I reversed its direction. I slowed it down.
Yeah.
The sense was, I can question this.
Nice. And when I can question this, what happens next?
Well, now I've got the sense that I can experiment. I can go,
Mm.
what if I choose an experience that I want to have that I haven't had, that's not happening presently? What if I
And
just
and as that little guy, sorry to interrupt, but as that little guy, what would you choose straight away for your new?
I'm not little, I'm big.
Sorry, what?
I'm not little anymore, I'm big.
Well, sorry, yes. So as the bigger, sorry, forgive me, but it's kind of like little guy grown up big.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in that new state, let's call it that, in that new state, what is kind of the thing that you'd like to put your attention on now that you can question what do you want to do with that? What would be what's the first step, having made this shift? What happens to dad? What happens to his influence? What happens to your relationship with him? What's the next step for you in that?
Um, so you're asking with directly towards my father, or
Whatever you want. I mean, it's kind of because that's where it's come up, that suddenly we're in this space where you're a lot younger and you're being told you can't have. We've had quite a conversation about that. We changed the energy position and how it
yes, the
moves,
seven
sped it up,
devils?
slowed it down, flipped it around. And suddenly, because it's all just energy, I mean, the wonderful thing about that technique, which comes from Richard Bandler, I guess, is that it's just so elegant, but it immediately utilizes the metaphor of emotion, which is it's just energy in motion, emotion. And so, well, which way is it moving? It's effervescent. Does it stay effervescent bubbles when you flip it around and take it the other way, or does it change into something
It
else?
changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
The effervescence changed. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it changes, what is it? And that's where we need to then explore, okay, well, what does it change into? And if this feels better, how can and this is submodality. So what if I make it brighter? What if I make the movement of my hand much broader? What if I use my whole arm? What if I stand up and I don't know, take a deep breath as I do it? Because then you're doing kinesthetic. What if I say, yeah, baby, it's all good as I do it. There's your auditory or whatever, but or sing a favorite song, or whatever. Or as some people would do is chant or just sing middle C. I don't know, whatever. But you bring these different that's your modalities. You bring the different modalities in, and what makes something stick is when you bring an extra modality or two in, so that you stop being locked into the one pattern of the one kind of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
one emotional strategy or pattern. Yeah, so there's my query. So okay, so look, if we can be talking about your dad, we can be talking about the fact that we were talking about scarcity. Um, had to look at the page again, but I remembered that it was there. Scarcity. So when you do that with your arms, like do it right now. So if you do it in that new direction and you notice that the effervescence has changed into something else, but you broaden the movement of your arms, and your dad is still in the picture, and yet notice what's happening to your dad. Notice what's happening to your body in that. Notice what's happening to what we'd call your relationship with yourself, with your dad. The whole shebang, and just pops into mind that's standing out.
Well, what came immediately was um, a curiosity and inquiry. Well, what do you want? It's an inquisitive
Mm,
sense about what does that person want, whether it's dad or whether it's my daughters, whether it's you.
yeah,
It's a genuine interest in, well, what do you want? So
yeah.
does that make sense? I don't think it has to make sense. It's just
Well, it's interesting. I
it's,
guess my
it's
query is
different.
I was kind of asking what happens to you. So the first thing that you notice happens to you is you have a curious query around what does someone else want? And okay, so where are you in that?
I'm the interested person. I'm
Yeah.
the one.
So you're the interested person, and yet we were kind of started out doing this kind of conversation because you were wanting something different. You
Yeah,
didn't want points to paper scarcity. You wanted something that's more in line with abundance. And then suddenly your
yeah, yeah.
abundance is when you flip it, your abundance is querying the outside world or whoever
It's
you're in
curiosity
relationship.
about. It's a curiosity about others.
Yeah.
So
So how does that figure with what you want?
it feels really good to because now it's relational. The original feeling was very isolated,
Mm.
very very cut off, and this one is there's almost a joy about actually being interested in other people.
Yeah. Right. Job done.
And
That's good. Okay.
well, it was a funny process because
Yeah.
when I think about it, Dad just couldn't do that. He had no interest in us. I mean,
Yeah.
he certainly, obviously, as a human being, he had the potential, but he didn't know how to do it.
Mm.
He didn't know
Mhm.
how to motivate himself to do it. He didn't. Other people were just a burden. If
Mm.
for him to put the energy into others, but it feels so good to actually see someone else and be curious. Well, what do you want? I
Yeah,
mean, it feels much better.
great. Well done.
There's a joyousness there that wasn't there when I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not allowed to have.
Yeah, yeah. So in this present moment, which is where we've been doing this whole conversation about the past, in this present moment, my guess is that you're still able to feel that what do you want feeling.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Oh
so
yeah.
so let's say we travel out into a a week in the future or whatever. How does that play out more and more? What is your imagining about the possible delight and surprise that that may offer you? What
Um,
just let it pop into mind. Just let it kind of
yes, a sense of connection, or
yeah.
a sense of, let me denominalize it,
Mm,
a sense of connecting.
yeah.
And there's abundance in that. There's,
Mm.
yeah.
It's interesting because I remember, my daughter has often asked me in the past, oh, how do I make friends? I said, well, turn up and show some interest. It's like, well, just show some interest, and how many times, I mean, even real estate agents, they're the greatest at it in some ways, everyone loves to hate a real estate agent, but fundamentally, what are they, well, what do they learn first off is to, whether it's pretend or real. And my dad used to be in the game before he himself got dementia, and and he had a couple of salespeople who just couldn't go out of their way enough to find out what people were interested in and what they loved because that was part of their wiring, their circuitry to build rapport or build a relationship so they could sell them a great house. And they would and they build relationships with these people. So when these people later on decided they want to move on, they'd call this guy straight away. Why? Because the guy actually had a valid, honest, honorable interest in who they were and what they wanted.
He just
And
used real estate as a vehicle.
it's just a vehicle. It's just, I mean, he might have been a doctor, I'm really interested in your body and how we can make it well again, or doing what we do, coaching or whatever it is. I mean, every aspect of life, no matter how big or small or whatever the labeling is, has potential to it has if it has humans or live beings in it. And I think that's what a lot of people are drawn to, kind of um, working with animals actually, because there's that kind of like they're just such a massive interest, and there's nothing, there's nothing other than gratitude that seems to come back to, unless you're dealing with snakes or something, there's no gratitude with a snake, but it's probably why they call some people dirty old snakes. But um, yeah, so how does that, okay, so let's just try something out for fun. If you were to try to connect with I can't have, what happens?
Feels weird.
Yeah, good. Good. That's great.
Yeah.
And so that would suggest that, and this is for the listener, this is really important in these processes, and you've got to remember, speaking to the listener, is that, Keith and I have been working with each other a long time. We know each other really well, and we can see each other in this podcast. And so that's how I could see that Keith's arms are moving and that sort of thing. And so that's why we went down that track. But the thing that is it might seem too simple and too easy, but actually when you pull away all of the kind of fantasies about what things mean and all of the technologies around what this part, all the and all the psychology and everything, what I'm doing and what Keith is doing with me is we're watching each other. And we're listening to each other and we're picking up on things that seem incongruent. We're picking up on things that seem to stand out. So when we're communicating with each other or with people we know, well, more Keith going forward, not in the past, winding you up. Um, good. He's laughing. Is that that's part of the curiosity. Oh well, he did that thing with his hands. Well, what if we explore that a little bit? Because the body is just metaphorically demonstrating what's happening inside the mind.
Mm.
And the mind has no distinction between skin, bone, muscle, whatever. It's just that the mind is everywhere in a sense. And so that we just have a name for it. But and so that I just want to explain that that's what we're doing there. And sometimes it can seem very simplistic. But what I wanted to say next was the main point is that if and just feedback on me on this, Keith. So what you've had, I'm guessing, is the shift that you just had into a new space. That new space is way more compelling and offers much more abundant potential than staying in the original state.
It certainly does, yes.
So would it be correct in saying that that excites the conscious unconscious mind because all it wants to do is have more abundance and more creativity and maybe potentially achieve more? So it's going to, and that's why I asked, well, if you try to get the old feeling, you found it seems stupid or something. Well, that's because it no longer has any usefulness to it. It's kind of like, it's just because you've found that you can do something better.
Yeah.
Now, that how I want to say that to the listener is when you finally get your balance on the bike, why would you lose your balance again? When you finally get how the clutch and the accelerator work in first gear, why would you pig jump along the road ever again? And that's kind of a logical or left brain way of looking at this, is that, well, that's why we test it. Try and do it again. Try to feel scarcity. Try to feel it, try to connect with it, and try to imagine being in your world like over the next week in that old state of scarcity and notice what's happening
Do you recall
instead.
what the question was? Or
Yeah, 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 there you go. So that's even, see, that in itself. So
No, I'm just
I
trying to. I really am trying to remember the question.
yeah, so well, that's because
I
party
can't remember
brains.
the question.
Yeah, it's because party brains now saying, well, I'm not even interested in the question because it's. So the question is, if you were to float out into a future time and place where in the past you would have had that old feeling of scarcity, what do you notice is immediately different now? You see, you're
Curiosity.
smiling. It's completely different. Your body's relaxed. There's no tension in your face. You just, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but it's like the most important thing is the non-verbal is there's just no tension in your face or your body at all. Whereas before that, there was always a bit of tension. There's a bit of like, oh, I wish I could, I wish I could. So can
Yeah.
you explain what was that feeling more explicitly of that future time?
Curiosity
Yeah,
was.
it comes back to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. Um, just to expand on this slightly, it was like, did that sound correct? To expand on that just slightly, it was like, oh, what's going to happen? It's a question of how am I going to be surprised in that
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
so
wicked.
it's not a curiosity where I'm going to make something happen. I'm genuinely I'm looking forward to the surprise. What's going to happen?
Okay, so there's an answer to the original question about attachment. So how attached are you now to the idea of the thing that you think you wanted, now that you just have an attitude of curiosity and you're moving into the future with that? What's happened to the attachment to some goal, some outcome, some thing that's apparently going to make you happier? What's happened to that? Is it as strong? Does it feel the same? Is it weaker? Is it, what is it?
It's not as paralyzing. It's far less. There's far less sense of I have to have this thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
There's a lot more relaxation
right,
about it.
right. And is there a sense there that this new feeling might expand and grow, or is
Oh,
there
it's really
some,
pleasurable. I'd very
yeah,
much like
yeah,
it.
yeah. So one would suggest that,
Excuse me.
one would suggest that that would be a precursor to it, to
Mm,
more explanation of that feeling and what creates and drives it.
yeah, yeah.
You know. The interesting thing about I guess, if you don't mind, is that, I think there's a point where we're having a goal is really, it's kind of too static. It's kind of it's almost like a function of consumerism. It's almost like a function of the last century, and we want to keep producing and owning and controlling. Actually, having a goal is kind of I'm controlling the pathway towards this thing that's going to make me happy.
Mm.
Because when I reach this goal, it's usually an externalized thing.
That's an interesting take. It's about control.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to control this colossally infinite kind of expansive thing called the I don't know, morphic universal energy, and so that I can have this this really important thing called a goal, which is like it, which once I've had it for, depending on what it is going to. I've got this really interesting, like when we went to Italy years ago, and I've always loved Vespers, and I took a photo of a Vespa, and it was like this old it's actually a 1965 Vespa, and it was a black Vespa with a helmet, and it was just leaning up. Didn't even have a stand. It was just leaning up against a wall. I took it in black and white, just like honestly the perfect picture of a Italian Vespa. It was beaten up, but obviously someone was riding it. It even had a crack through the chassis, but someone had glued it or something. It was fantastic. It was like just totally. I think it was actually in Milan, or it was, it was one of these cities where, everything's so mad that they just don't care. Anyway, so I put on a t-shirt, and I've worn this for the last 4 years. And I thought, in my subconscious, I thought, that Vespa kind of just says something. I love the shape of them. They're called the small body Vespa. It means it's a smaller frame. It's one of the first that came out. But it's a 50cc. It has makes a horrible noise and all that sort of stuff. And I was thinking, but I loved it, how rough it was. It had a patina, it was used, it was battered, and it just didn't matter. Like the guy doesn't even lock it up because who's going to steal that thing? I thought, just love. Anyway, I was on Trade Me, and there it is. I'm going, oh my God, that's it wasn't black. It was just this, and someone had rebuilt this whole thing. It was 1965. It was exactly the same shape, everything. I go, oh my God, this is the Vespa. And it so happens some things came to things, and I could offer the guy some money. And anyway, so I got this Vespa. But and the funny thing is, whenever I walk past it, because I had to drop it off at of course, at the mechanic the other day to get the electrics done and stuff. But I just, every time I walk past it, it was interesting because I smile to myself, and I think I smile to myself because I had no intention, because I've had two concussions, as you know, and one of them was because of a motorcycle accident on a Vespa just 3 years ago, or 2.5, 3 years, and 3 years. And the interesting thing is that, my wife said, "Oh, don't you ever get one of them again?" Blah, blah, blah. But I just, can't help myself. But there was no need, there was no desire, there was no goal, but it was just a sense of, oh my God, that's that Vespa that I saw, took a photo, put on my t-shirt, and worn that t-shirt. I've even cut the print of that off my t-shirt, off an old t-shirt, and put it on a new t-shirt. I'm so attached to that photo because I used to do professional photography. So I'm going, that's a really good photo, So there's a lot in it, So there's a lot of emotion, but it was fun. Anyway, so I took it out, had to take it to the mechanic yesterday, and I'm having so much fun on this stupid bike. But I don't know what I'm saying this for, but it was a manifestation without wanting.
Mm.
But everything came together, and I talked to my wife, and she says, "Well, I mean, if you can do it, and it's, we don't, you end up destitute and impoverished, and all that sort of stuff." And I said, "Well, we won't. We can do it, and it's It's just, and I said, but I wasn't attached. And then I talked to the guy and yada yada, and he said, well, make me an offer. I made him a stupid offer. Happens that he's rebuilding a bathroom, needed the cash. And he said, righto. The thing hadn't been written for 10 years. It's just been sitting in he just loved looking at it. He'd go downstairs every Friday night with a beer and just look at the scooter. He hadn't even started it up in 10 years, but it started up straight away. So it was just, even with the shitty old gas in it, it was so funny. That's Vespa for you. But I guess what I'm saying is like it's another example maybe of just well, putting it out there and the delight and surprise that I still get, even when I think about the story, even when I think about seeing the original, because it's the same year, the same version, the beautiful shape, the simplicity, all that sort of stuff, oily rag, just all of that sort of stuff, and it was like, I don't know so there are aspects of our life that that artists have this, poets have this. There's that moment. I wrote a poem the other day about, because this is all some shags, and they're just actually no spoonbills at low tide, just all collected, about 10 of them on a rock. But it was almost like they're waiting for the tide. So when you can't fish, you fix your nets. So they were cleaning and preening and looking after each other and all that sort of stuff. And it was this whole kind of poem came to mind, you know what I mean? And I was quite surprised because I hadn't written a poem in months, and it's like, oh, do you know what I'm saying here?
Yes.
And it's about that observational curiosity of like, well, what if? Well, that's it, and going with it and seeing what it comes up. And this is what I've noticed really important is when the delight and surprise or the new idea comes, or the moment, the epiphany, whatever, totally accentuate it, totally make it, dramatize it a little bit. Oh, wow, I didn't, because then you build the neurology to make it stick,
Mm.
and we build our experience, we enliven that moment. And so, oh yeah, so I just got a little tickle for it. So it's like, so you enliven it, and so what that will do is sends, if there is such a thing as morphic resonance, and we attract that which we put out, then the more we put out of that, the more it must come back. And the beauty of it is, the problem with having a fixed goal is, remember, if I make the goal today, when I'm wanting the goal, I'm not that person anymore. And hopefully, I'm a little bit more evolved. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable, maybe a little bit more loving or compassionate or whatever. So, is the fixed idea of the goal that I'm having now actually even relevant in 6 months, a year, 2 years? I mean, what we've seen in the last, just with AI, what's changed just in the last 6 months with AI? I mean, most people's goals back 6 months ago, yeah, whatever. I mean, if you're in IT and you made goals 6 months ago, you're going, yeah, well, that doesn't work. If you're in Bitcoin or the blockchain 6 months ago and you're looking at XRP and Ripple, you're going, no, that doesn't work, or, it just doesn't. If you're looking at American politics 6 months ago and you go, yeah, whatever. And then you listen to Mike Pence at the UN yesterday, which would have been the 15th of February. Oh my God. I mean, that guy stood up and literally just told them all off. It's incredible. It was like, wow, whether he's right or wrong, what a beautiful, courageous, exceptional, God, 20 minutes that he gave. It was just exceptional. Gotta watch it. Even just
Mm.
for watching someone who can narrate, or who's an orator, who can just give passion, talk about democracy, love, Christianity, whatever it is, but actually do it in front of a whole bunch of people who do not want him to be there ever, because he's questioning everything that they're doing. And he just, he nailed it. So,
Well, was this a speech to the UN?
it was the UN Defense Council, I think it was, in Germany, just 2 days ago. Might have even been yesterday, because the dates are all wrong with Twitter and everything.
Can you send a
X.
link? I'd like to see
Yeah,
it.
sure. It's profound, and but I guess, that was surprising for me. That was a delight and surprise. And it was really funny because he said, we Americans have had to deal with Greta Thunberg for the last, 4 or 5 years. You've only had to deal with Elon Musk for like 2 or 3 weeks. you know, Come on, guys. No one clapped and no one laughed. It was so good. That in itself was just worth turning up for. Yeah. So I mean, it was, that's you know, and I don't know if anyone has expected what's happened in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Has it even been 2 months? I mean, maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's a bit longer now, but I don't think anyone's expect this to happen. Now, there's a lot that's not good. And yet the most important thing is they're prepared to fail, they're prepared to make mistakes, and they're prepared to go all out and follow their what if. What if we do this? What if we challenge this? What if we have a chat to, what if we sit down with Putin? It's like, seriously, man, this shit's fantastic. What if we say we're going to take everyone out of Palestine and turn and turn the Gaza into like a strip mall of hotels? It's like, gee, I wonder what will happen. It's like, oh my God, the guts, the craziness to say that. And would anyone ever have imagined that someone would do that? No.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're looking down the barrel of at the morning. But it's also it's that delight and surprise. It's that incredible, courageous curiosity almost that we kind
Well,
of.
I want to grab you on that point. I think you're touching on something that's really important. A lot of people, I know I'm generalizing, but I think a lot of people can relate that when people have seen difference, let's say over the last 4 years, there's been a lot of fear involved. We don't know what's going to happen. So this idea of I don't know what's going to happen next, attached to that is a sense of fear.
Yes.
What you're talking about is delight and surprise. So I'm going into my future. I'm doing that anyway. I'm going into my future. The sense of being open to being delighted and surprised is profoundly different to being scared of what you think might be coming, or being scared of I don't know what's coming,
Hmm. Yep.
as opposed to I don't know what's coming. My goodness, I'm excited because it's going to surprise me, and I'm going to be delighted by a difference.
And that the what is good, absolutely. And the added bit to that is that, yeah, what you just said is you're going to be, what am I going to feel? What
Mm,
what what new experience am I going to have
yeah,
because of what might happen?
but
Whereas,
am I already prepared to feel fear
yeah,
just from a difference?
yeah, and
How
and,
how
and sorry, Karen.
how do we model? How do we put, for want of a better way of saying it, how do we put on this new suit of delight and surprise as opposed to fear? How do we do that
Well, you just did it.
for our listeners? How do we do it?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's like it's a choice in some regards, and that is, either way, I'm looking into the future.
Mm.
Which viewpoint, as I look into the future, gives me a good feeling?
Can you
Well, if I'm looking into the future
expand on that?
yeah, if I'm looking into the future, and like anxiety is a great example. It's like,
Oh
so if
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
feeling anxious and I'm feeling fearful, oh my God, we're all going to die and blah, blah, blah. Well, what's the feeling? It's a horrible feeling. It's like, well, why would I bother? I lose hopeless. I feel hopeless. I feel depressed or
yeah.
whatever. I get anxiety. I get all these different things, and I associate into future times where everything's just horrible.
This is a good point because they're taking the anxiety into the future. So
Well,
as you
that's
say,
what anxiety is.
yeah,
Anxiety
well,
is
they've
a
got a
few.
feeling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They've
totally.
got a feeling. It's really unpleasant, and then they say, "Let's attach it to the future."
Well, a good example is that, and I can't remember where it comes from, but I remember learning about and hearing about it during my training in NLP, and that is that, they did a long study into chronic pain, and what they realized was chronic pain is predefined by the person's perception that pain will persist. So the person's expectation that the pain will continue out into the future creates the neural pathways of expectation for that pain to persist. And because the body can't really make good distinctions about reality and fantasy, it will generate those neural pathways for the pain to persist. So, well, there's no difference. So if I imagine that all hell's going to break loose and we're going to lose, yeah, then my body feels terrible about that. It'll go into some kind of form of flight or fight or something like that. And then because that's against my natural kind of predisposition for self-preservation, my brain will go, okay, well, we need to wire this in so that we can be cautious going forward and expect this to happen. And then we can try to avoid it. Well, good luck with that. So what's the opposite? The opposite is, well, if it's all imaginary and it's all kind of based on some fabrication or fiction, whether it's apparently scientific or apparently on Twitter or whatever, but it's still imaginary. It's still a fabrication because we do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. We
Yeah.
actually don't. I
So
mean, I
the
know,
future must be something imagined. It must be
yeah,
a fantasy.
yeah, outside of, the tides will change, the sun will, well, the earth will spin and the sun will look like it's coming up, yada, yada, yada. Outside of those geophysical and biological aspects, it's like, well, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. So what feels better to have a look into the future and expect delight and surprise, something that goes, wow, that's cool. I didn't expect that. That's nice. Oh, I could really use that or whatever. Oh, there's $50 in my bank account. And I didn't realize that was going to be there. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that payment. Whatever.
Mm.
And see, here's the beauty of that. You don't have to keep repeating that concept because it's wired into us. How do we know that? Because when you learned to write your name and you did it so it was legible, you went, ah, when you got your balance when you were a toddler, holding onto the chair leg, you get your balance, you're not falling over, and you take your first step, you go, ah, you literally, your eyes go wide open, your parents freak out and just love you, and they say, come on, all that sort of stuff. The level of neural growth in that moment is astronomical. So every time we have that kind of experience, it's actually naturally attuned. It's already built in. We
Mm.
we we know what it is. It's like when I suddenly realized that that thing that was hurting, sore arm, sore leg, whatever it is, that I'd forgotten about it, that it's no longer hurting, and maybe it hasn't even been hurting for a week. I go, oh wow, that's cool. I'd forgotten about it. It's built in. But being told constantly that we're all going to die because some fantasy, because some fiction, because all this, they have to repeat that
Exactly.
absolutely all.
Thank you for going there.
They
So
just have to
delight.
repeat it over and over
Yeah.
because it's not a natural. Listen. I do celebrant work for funerals, which sounds crazy, but I do, and it's an incredible privilege. But sometimes we'll be standing there at the reception, and it's quite heavy, and then someone will say, "Oh my God, do you remember when Rick said?" And everyone, not without exception, everyone just starts laughing because you can't stop it. Because everyone remembers Rick, they remember the guy they're saying goodbye to, and suddenly they remember, oh, yeah, he used to do this really stupid thing, and everyone's gone. But then they've all had a laugh, blah, blah, and then they suddenly look around, they suddenly realize, actually, we were at his wake. they have to remind themselves. You don't have to remind yourself necessarily to be happy, but if you've been accustomed to going down the, oh my God, we're all going to die because, then you kind of
Yeah.
have to just decide. It's a decision. It's all it is. What do I decide to think about and put my attention on today? Am I going, and you do it as soon as you wake up. You say, okay, I'm waking up, and the first thought is, oh my God, I can see myself at the end of the day smiling and it's all good. That's the first thing you do. And then you work backwards from there. And you say, well, actually, something's going to delight and surprise. Because I've had a delight and surprise today. And it's like, something's going to delight and surprise me today. And I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can see
You're
myself at the end of the day smiling because it's all good.
you're touching on something which is huge. So this is something we can actually do for ourselves.
every day.
The I was going to say the world. There are peoples, there are institutions that, as you said, are constantly bombarding us, constantly reminding us
Well,
to,
mainstream media, man,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, is there any need? I
okay,
don't need to know that some guy in Texas lost his shit with an AK-47 and took people out. I don't need to know. What I would really appreciate is the fact that there were 400 patents today in America alone, and half of them were for power generation, or some of them were for new forms of, decentralized finance, or whatever. Patents are a sign of creativity. I want to know how many babies were born today that are healthy and happy. I mean, whatever. Just give me some number. If you're going to give me numbers about, why are you telling me something that is so unimportant to me? Yes, I feel compassion. I feel hurt for those people, but I'm not in Texas, and it doesn't help me build relationships. It doesn't help me trust, it doesn't help me create, doesn't help me open to curiosity. Because suddenly I'm wondering if as I walk down the street, oh my God, I wonder if someone's, well, not New Zealand, but I'm wondering if someone's carrying, in New Zealand, no one carries a gun in New Zealand, you know, but you know what I'm saying. But they carry knives in New Zealand, and
mm,
if there's ever something like that happens in New Zealand, it's on the news and they repeat it over and over, and suddenly you generalize that and start to expect it on your street corner. But it's
yeah,
actually 1 in a million people are wired for that, and 1 in 5 million people will probably do it if they're wired for it. It's like, seriously, we're talking about the absolute 0.00 whatever percent. I don't know what it is. Someone will be doing the research. Ask AI. What is the percentage of people who are actually prone to actually picking up a knife and going into your local dairy and dealing to someone so that they can get a free ice cream? I mean, seriously, it's so small that
yeah.
it's meaningless. What is meaningful is, how do we care about each other? How do we connect and communicate and share fun shit with each other? I mean, I'm sorry
Well,
to use that vernacular, but
this is the thing, though. What you've pointed out is there's this continuous bombardment from mainstream media, as an example,
absolutely.
of, as you said, because our natural state is curiosity and wanting to be surprised and wanting to be delighted. This is the natural state. It requires repetition to actually suppress that.
Well,
It
it's
requires
called mass formation,
mass formation. It
cultural
requires, yeah,
hypnosis. You
it
just
requires this constant repetition of something really unpleasant.
here's another example. So if I was a baby and I was wired for misery, right? In the gym, if we were wired for misery, I would take my first attempt at a step, I'd fall over. That would be it. I'm not doing that ever again.
Never
No,
do it
because
again.
I'm just miserable. I'm going to crawl for the rest of my life. That's the end of it. And so we'd all be in, we'd have all, the whole, everything would have, we wouldn't have cars because they're too dangerous. Because, the first car that was ever built just went too fast and people thought they were going to blow up. That's it. No, we won't do that. It's like, the first
Yeah.
person who created a shovel. Oh my gosh, it's too sharp. Oh, we'll hurt ourselves. Oh, we won't do shoveling then. We'll just use our hands. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is. You generalize the absolute extreme absurd thing that is bad or incorrect or a failure.
Yeah.
Tell Edison that shit. I mean, he had people knocking on his door with candles saying, "You'll never make anything go, you're an idiot." Well, we look back now and we say, gosh, I wish I could get rid of LED lights because they make noises. But other than that, we've got electricity, we've got light, we've got all
That's
these other
terrible light.
things. It's horrible light. It's
This
just horrible.
this is important. What you're saying is important because innate in us, literally, right down to the atomic level and beyond, is a sense of wanting to explore what abundance offers in the
Yeah,
first place.
yeah.
As you said, the baby who takes the first step does not give up if they fail. They
Yeah.
go, okay, that was a mistake. What do I need to do differently?
Well, I don't even think at that age, I mean, they're non-verbal, they're pre-verbal, so they
They're
don't
not
even know if
verbal,
they don't,
but they
all they
make the
can see.
mistake and they just try again. They
Well,
try
of course,
again.
because they can see everyone else in the room is walking around. They're going, "Give me some of that shit right now, because I want to get the cookies on the counter." I mean, that's all they're after. Give me the cookies. I can't do it if I'm crawling. You know,
There's not a sense of not. There's a sense of
yeah,
I'm going to do it
yeah.
again. I'm going to do
And
it
it's
again.
and it's interesting because, like I said last time, we were talking about um we were talking about Jordan Peterson and Tony Robbins having their chat, and this thing called push and pull. And interestingly, the media has had to just push and push and push and push this whole thing. And half of it we now know was not true. Most of it we now know was not true. It was fabrication, and all these horrible things happened because of it, all over the world. And yet, and never once was there a pull conversation. The pull towards joy, the pull towards community, the pull towards sharing and trust and all that sort of stuff. There was never that pull of values and contribution and all those beautiful things that actually build immunity and keep people alive. You look back through all the anthropological studies that are even still going on in the Amazon, they do not survive by segregating when someone's sick. I remember as a kid, let's go to the measles party. And we all trooped off to the measles party, Come on, kiddies, let's go to the measles party, let's go and have a cold and a flu together. Mate, it's like we're going, great. Is there going to be chips? And so there's always chips and saveloys or sausages. And so we're all having measles together. And
Yeah,
half of
yeah.
us never got it. We never got it. Never, ever, ever
That's a
got it.
huge topic in itself, but yeah,
Oh,
half
don't
of us
even
never
go
got
there,
it.
Keith. You brought it up, so don't go.
But it's fascinating. Half of us never got it. Go and do
Yeah,
your research.
yeah, exactly. So I guess, let's come all the way back. If we're talking, and he points to the paper, reads scarcity. If we talk scarcity versus abundance, what we have been compelled by the nature of the narratives in mainstream. And it's backed by many of the sitcoms and movies and all these different things, that there's this adversary that's trying to kill us, and we need, Mr. America and bloody Iron Man and, that guy who wears his undies on the outside, super dork. Anyway, so we need these people to save us. What's that also saying? We can't actually look after ourselves. We need some fictional superhero to save us. How ridiculous is that? I mean, it's
Yeah,
great shit to watch on a movie, but it's actually the most ridiculous premise that we are utterly incapable of saving or looking after ourselves. We need to rely on some fiction, some alien, something outside of us that isn't even a part of our humanity, or is an
yeah,
extreme version of elite technological functioning, or magic, some magical freaking thing. In the end, what was it? End game, the last of in the end, as they're just about all going to die. Of course, Iron Man dies anyway, who cares? But fundamentally, one of them turns up, and it turns out that he's got all the powers to just fix it anyway. Oh, what was the point? And what did they do in that moment? They basically said, there isn't a God, it's that guy. It's a challenge, and he looks like some, magic guy, magician, you know, whatever. It was
yeah.
just, oh, I mean, the technology, the special effects, unbelievable. He's so drawn in and everything. But the absolute premise was just humans are pathetic and will die unless something comes and saves them. That's
Saves
the
them.
utter insanity of
I
it.
love where I
Sorry,
love where you've
bit of
been
a
going
bloody
because
rant, but because I
it's
love
a
those
great rant.
movies, they're
Because
great.
where you've gone, you've been able to articulate something that I've known intuitively, but haven't been able to put words to it because I knew abundance and scarcity were really important. They're fundamental patterns. And what you've said, essentially, scarcity is a construct. It's not a fact. Scarcity has
Absolutely.
to be repeated over and over again to convince us to move away from abundance, which is our innate state.
Yeah, I
The
couldn't agree more.
multifaceted nature of abundance, whether it's a thing like, here's my phone, I got a thing, or whether it's or whether it's relating to one of your kids in a beautiful and caring way. That's another facet of abundance. These are
Absolutely.
innate.
Mother's love.
Scarcity is
Mother's love, man. Mother's love.
mother's love.
I watch my wife sometimes go, good God, mother's love.
Yeah,
You just can't
absolutely.
you can't
Absolutely.
go any further than that, really,
Yeah.
unless
So
someone's wired
scarcity,
wrong.
yeah. So
Yeah,
scarcity is made up. This is what you've been able to do in today's talk. this is what you've been able to articulate. It's made up, people. Abundance is our natural state. And for whatever reasons of personal history, there are people out there who are so fearful they have to impose this idea of scarcity. And a lot of us buy into it because we feel the fear.
Yeah, and everyone's had an experience of it, to some degree, but I sort of wonder how much of our experience historically of scarcity and I think, going to war is a form of scarcity. Thinking that,
Yeah,
that you've got an adversary, someone who's of the human race, but a different culture, and we go to war against them because they don't believe what we do.
yeah.
That's a huge
Can I
sense of,
speak? Can I speak to that? In
yeah,
moments of what you just said, we've all had moments of scarcity.
yeah,
The larger frame is we're really clever. We can do
yeah,
really clever things.
yeah.
So in those moments, guess what happens? We go,
We,
we come up with ideas.
yeah, yeah.
In every single instance of supposed scarcity, we go, well, what I need is this and this to get around the obstacle.
Absolutely. So
We're,
it's
we're
the
not we're just like
adversity,
adversity.
adversity stimulate, like if it's an adversity of a weather event, we find ways to prep differently. If it's adversity of someone's firing a gun at us, we find ways to cure we get, it's only through curiosity. I mean, we watch something. I love martial arts. I had a black belt at 19. It was like, the curiosity of how we can move our body in such ways, to utilize this another person's energy or to block it. There's so many ways of doing these things, and yet in the outcome is we don't know. We don't necessarily. It's not always what we expect it will be in martial arts. Aikido's like that. All these different things. Jiu-jitsu. And it's also as I said last week, I was watching that guy who was doing the snowboarding, and this guy was just doing the snowboarding. He's one of these Red Bull guys, and I suddenly realized this guy isn't snowboarding. He's clowning around on a snowboard. I mean, you can't do that unless you give up. But you can't give up until you know what you're doing.
Mm,
So he's obviously
mm,
lived all his life. He's probably 19, full of Red Bull. And he goes, I'm going to just try everything and see what happens. And everything he did was just superfluous. It was like watching. It was just, because I've done clowning. It was like watching a clown on a snowboard, just making stuff up, and it was so fun to watch. Because it's just fearless. If I make a mistake, I've broken every bone in my body anyway. Who cares if I break another one again? It was
yeah,
just literally like that. I'm sorry, but that's
yeah.
the kind of, and that's that abundance. Anything's possible within respect to gravity and speed and these different things, to conditions. But even then, it's like how do those kids get on one of those skateboards and flip it up? It
Flip it up.
rotates,
How do they do
rotates six
that?
times. Well, I honestly believe, and I'll put my hand on my heart, you can see me doing it, Keith, is I honestly believe that there's something else going on as well. And that is because they know it can be done. They want
Yeah,
it to be done. They believe it can be done. And some freaking confluence of energies comes together, as well as the fact that they flip it. But you watch the outtakes. They don't flip it. They break their ankles. They do all sorts of crazy stuff. They hurt. They blah, 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 until something clicks. And like the baby letting go of the chair leg, they're off, and suddenly they can't not do it anymore. And so then they
yeah,
head for the next thing to just delight and surprise themselves with.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's the game.
It's going back to the baby that makes that first step and the delight of, oh my goodness,
Well,
I
I
did
mean,
that. Let's try another one.
yeah, the other one is when they bite their own finger and suddenly realize it's attached to their hand, to their
Yeah,
body.
yeah,
They bite their. Luckily, they've got no teeth, that they suddenly crunch it, and it's like, wow, that's my thing. And suddenly they spend the next 4 or 5 days just looking at this thing that's
yeah,
wobbling in front of them. And it's like, well, that's the first maybe self-realization aspect.
yeah, yeah.
There's a great thing in Sanskrit, which is, and correct me if there's someone who has the truer interpretation, but there's the first syllable of the Sanskrit of the Veda is ak, which is I believe it's on ak, literally ak, but it's ak. It's pronounced that way. And then the first sentence of the Veda describes the first syllable. Then the first paragraph describes the first sentence, and that's how it goes. But the first syllable is ak, and it's kind of the way it was explained to me is consciousness comes out of itself because it's just consciousness. There's nothing to do, so it just comes out of itself, and that's ah. And as it comes out of itself, it's got nowhere to look because there's nothing else. So it turns back and sees itself. And in that moment, it becomes insatiably curious about what it might be. And so it comes back and plonks back down into itself. So it kind of comes out and goes, ah, and that's the baby suddenly seeing its own hand. It's like, ah, it's like, it's, please, correct me if I'm wrong on that, whoever knows this stuff better than I do, but that was the explanation I got. And it's such a beautiful kind of, primary kind of, and that was my first experience when I first transcended in meditation, which was straight away when I learned the technique, which I feel extremely grateful for, was I suddenly thought to myself, what is going on that I should have done that? That was my first query. It's like, what's actually going on at the bedrock of my consciousness that I should suddenly just go straight in and feel completely at peace? Because I was, I had paraquat poisoning. I was extremely unwell. And in that moment, there was no unwellness. There was no nothing. I was just completely silent. It was like, wow, okay, so what's going on? And I spent the next 10 years working it out. And then I had that epiphany while mowing the lawn, which was, it was my mind at the deepest levels, like that God, that God principle of arc is just insatiably curious all the time, looking for the next thing. And I just threw something at it that it went, wow, I love this shit. And it just went right inside, and in a nutshell, it's been my fascination since. So,
Your change of status then was hilarious.
oh, really? Yeah. You might have to describe that to the listener. I have no idea.
Yeah. Just you're extremely animated, and then a sudden sudden pause.
Yeah,
It was
that's
very
what it was
quick.
like. Yeah, it's exactly what it was like. Yeah. Well,
Oh,
that's been
this is exciting. This is being able to articulate this stuff because I've known it. But I had this concern that scarcity was the yin of the yin or yang of abundance, and it's not. It's a construct. I'm really excited about that because
yeah, and I think the way to prove that is, you know, they've even found that in a vacuum there is stuff, whether it's vibration, whether it's like light flowing, which they still, one of it's probably particles, going in a straight line or waves, but there's no nothing.
yeah, yeah,
There's no scarcity. There's no nothing. And the whole concept of, half these things that we've been led to believe about, well, everything's going to run out. Well, yeah, if you believe it, and if you organize, you know, mechanisms and politics and whatever else you want to add to that with that belief, then sure, stuff will run out. But my personal experience with working with people, and some of the scarcities that they've experienced, and then suddenly flipping into an abundance and healing themselves or changing their lives quite radically or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, it doesn't exist. It's a construct. And it's a very
yeah.
useful construct if you want to keep people in a state of mind that leaves them open to the next instruction. And their next instruction comes from outside because they've lost the innate abundance that they that they are self-generating,
Mm,
that they are
mm.
self-learning, self-connecting. And that's not in a selfish or narcissistic sense, just in the sense of like, well, I'm connecting with myself first. Yes, that stupid analogy of like the oxygen mask in the plane, you stick it on first,
Yeah.
then you can help someone else. Well, if I'm not looking after me, and that's why I queried you when you said, I'm querying outside. Okay, so you're querying outside.
Mm,
What's, I then ask you what's happening for you. How are you in what's your healthy state as you query outside,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
one of the things in NLP with coaching is what's my resourceful state comes from, the resolve model with Richard Bolstad, which is a great model. And so there's that resolve model, the resourceful state. Okay, well, I'm going to get myself good first. So
Yeah.
getting yourself good is actually being attuned to the fundamental abundance of, how can I open up or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And something I've often enjoyed saying, I can only give what I have. So if I tap into my own abundance, everyone around me benefits. It's
and
win-win. So
And it's and once again repeating myself, but once again it comes, it does come that full circle. So like, well, my abundance is that I have enough. I feel full. So I want to know about you. I don't actually want, I would just want to talk about, tell me
Yeah,
about
yeah.
yourself. I remember going to a party once, it was the weirdest question. And I met this woman, I never met her before. She just looks at me. She goes, "So, what's your story?" I was like, and I remember it's like 30 years ago. It was like, I've never
That's a
forgotten it.
great question.
It's a great question. It's like, and it blew me. It was like I just didn't. I wasn't in a good space. I was quite, whatever the perception I have of what was going, but it just blew me. I just didn't know what to say
Oh, it's
because
lovely.
I never had that question. Yeah. So what's your story? But it's such a good question.
It's
What
a
you said.
lovely question.
Well,
It's a
my
lovely.
answer now, well, where would you like me to begin? I could start. It's like, well, in the past life. It's like, whatever. But it's
Let's
like,
write a new one here and now.
yeah, yeah, right now in this moment, I'm here with you and you're looking great. No, whatever, or you could say, well, my story is that I'm wondering when was the last time you asked that question and it didn't go well for you?
I know we've got to wrap up. There's
Yeah,
been a lot of takeaways here for me. I
it's
think it's
good
been
fun. It's good
fantastic.
fun.
One thing I want to just throw out, the idea that I can set a goal for me has now been profoundly changed to I'm going to set an experience.
Yeah, yeah. And then you've got plasticity.
Plasticity.
And
You've
then
got
you've got
movement, you've got
yeah,
flexibility, you've got
just an
possibilities.
experience. I had this experience once, I will tell it. And I used to get incredibly bad hay fever. And I never get it anymore. And I've smelt privet. Privet's the main one in New Zealand. It's a horrible kind of weedy bush, which we brought over for hedging on farms, not knowing what was going to happen next. A bit like taking cane toads into Queensland. Uh-oh. Whoops. But anyway, I had this realization one day, and I said to myself, I don't. I said to myself, what is this? I can kind of smell it, but most of the time I just have the reaction without smelling it. But I know that, often I'll walk down the road and I know I can see roses, but I can't smell them, but I know they have a smell. And so I said to myself, well, those roses are just a smell. So I kind of framed this and I said, what else is there that I just know is there, but it's a smell, but it's just not, it doesn't concern me at all. And so I said to myself, well, there's oranges. Walk into a house, you don't smell oranges. You can put them against your face and you can smell oranges, but you can't smell them. But I know that they have a smell. So I just went through hundreds of things, mostly natural things. And I said to myself, and privet is just a smell. And then I went through it again. Roses, just a smell. Oranges, just a smell. And I swear, I've never had a reaction of hay fever ever since. I just said, well, it's just a smell. It's not that it's trying to get me. Nothing's trying to get me. I have the abundance to shift my perception of reality. And so I said, well, it's just a smell. And I did this with a guy. I was working with this guy construction years ago, and he was just dripping with sweat. And I said, mate, do you have this problem with roses? He said, what? I said, what do you have this problem with roses? And he said, no. I said, well, it's just a smell. Because what are you on about? And I said, do you have this problem with and I used oranges. And I said, no. What about lavender? Lavender's kind of, no. I said, well, what about, and it was just a whole bunch. What about dandelions? Like if you see a dandelion in your face, it's not a nice smell, but it's a smell. It's no, because I knew it was a plant of some description. And he wasn't quite sure what it was, but he had an idea. So I drove him mad. And then I kept coming back to him and I kept saying, because that plant is just a smell. And he goes, yeah, I do. I swear, hand on heart, mate. He came to work the next day and he said, mate, you're weird. And I said, why? And he says, well, look at me. I said, what? Oh, I said, it's just a smell, isn't it? And he goes, it's just a smell. He stopped dripping.
Amazing.
The abundance of the mind, given a good reframe, and away you go, mate. So I got a million stories like that, so we'll call it there. Yeah. Was that in alignment with what you were saying? I got carried away, but
Which bit?
yeah, exactly. So I'm just gonna thank the listeners. Thank you once again for tuning in to our second show. But this might be who knows what number shows, because you might not start at the beginning. So thanks for listening, and we'll keep having these conversations. And if you want to feedback, there should be a comments option underneath. And so just write a comment, and even if you don't like it, or you feel challenged, let us know, and it'll be interesting to have a conversation about that as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening once again. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Aaron. It's been fantastic.
It's been amazing,
Thank
actually.
you very much.
I have no idea ever what's going to come up or come out.
I didn't know I was going to go like this.
No, me neither. Well, until next time.